Hello and welcome to Sassy as Fuck. I'm John McGreevy, a SaaS positioning copywriter. I'm joined by my co-host Alex McBradford, who I asked to give me a line about what I should say. He didn't have anything. So he's just a guy that joins the podcast sometimes. I don't even know who he is. Today we're joined by pricing expert Garrick van Buren. How's it going, Garrick?
It's pretty well. It's a beautiful day here. Hope it's gorgeous where you are as well.
Yeah. It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's actually not
It's
bad.
all right, yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
I do have a window there. That's not where I have just like my weather forecast shown on a tablet all day.
Oh yeah.
So what's your week look like so far?
Deep into a pricing project, super fun. I've currently got a project where we've got a suite of 12 products that we are trying to. Turns out the primary task is not look at pricing. The primary task is normalize the pricing tiers across all 12 of these things.
Oh, so you've got 12 products with different pricing across them all.
Yep, all selling to the same customer.
Oh, that's clear. That's really good for the customer to really shake things up.
And so I've been digging through past sales reports and existing pricing models and trying to find some signal. And we're very close. Which is always good. You know, going through. I mean, in creative, I did not, when I set out on this venture, realize how similar pricing is to other kinds of creative endeavors, whether it be copywriting or anything, other kinds of design work. Where my background is, it is very much like what is that signal that we have confidence in, that is going to make everything sort of fit together like the right puzzle pieces. And it's turning out to be that case, and I think it's delightful.
I think that makes it exciting. I do positioning, and so I think a key cornerstone of positioning is pricing. It's the same thing. It's how you're trying to frame your whatever you sell. You're trying to frame it a certain way, and price is like a big part of that. That's I think its features, the price, and service tend to be the three main things that make someone go, "Oh, you're better than them," or "You're worse," or sometimes it's just it's cheaper and has the same thing. So cool.
Yeah, and I think those are the three great bullet points, and all of them are clear signals to say, is this for me?
Yeah.
Is this going to help me in some way? I think what got me into this was too many founders, too many professional service providers, too many creative professional service people I saw just not pricing at a level that was anywhere near the kind of value they were providing. Mm-hmm. And started really digging into that and figuring out, well, who would benefit most from this kind of help? How do I help them understand it, and who can experiment? And really, that's what had one of the things that had me focused on the SaaS side is here are organizations that are getting enough volume that we can actually do some tests, that we can actually play with different levels, and no one's going to grump. Versus the kind of creative services that you and I provide. We just don't have enough iterations to be able to dial things in. Like it's much more about a single sale, big sale to a single customer, versus on the SaaS side, we are expecting maybe some sales led, maybe some inbound, but we've got lots of ways to test, value against different segments.
Yeah, and value, that's the word that kind of always comes to mind when I think people kind of I've already kind of accidentally, you've covered through several of my questions already just in that short thing, so that's kind of really for me. But value is kind of, that's a huge part of it. Is I think that when as a freelancer coming into it, people talk about time and you talk about and not as much about value, and that kind of becomes a problem. That becomes a battle, and some people end up getting stuck because they go with time rather than value, and then end up kind of in the wrong kind of pricing. But for SaaS, I think value, people see it as a bit too simplistic sometimes, in the sense that they go, well, if they're using Todoist for this is only slightly different to what Todoist do. They only charge £6 a month,
right.
and so and also you realise no. But if it's a niche problem you're solving in that area, value's completely different. So what is that? So what are those mistakes that SaaS companies specifically make around their pricing that, especially when it comes to kind of devaluing or overvaluing themselves?
I think there's two. One you just alluded to. One I am working on a massive rant about, which is pricing against the competitive set that you as the vendor are defining. I think is a massive mistake. Like you have no idea if the people that you are pricing against are even in the running of solutions that your target customer would choose. And so they're a really, or similarly, defining your competitive set super narrowly to only be other SaaS providers of this thing. And you're like, there are 1,000 ways to solve problems in businesses. Finding a SaaS vendor to do it is just one. You are competing with a bunch that are outside of that technology spectrum. You're competing with them hiring a full-time employee. You're competing with them hiring a contractor to do it manually and sitting around. Like there's a whole spectrum. And the question is, why would they choose a SaaS solution against any of those other ones? And then the other one is just absolutely punting on the pricing question at the very beginning. And I'm like, I don't know, I guess we'll figure it out after we get some beta testers. No. Because at that point, like the number of referrals I have gotten from customers who have said, hey, there's this great SaaS company. Love their work, love what they do, integral to me getting my job done. I would love to pay them more, but right now their prices are so low that I can't in good conscience go to my boss and say, give me more money to pay this vendor. They're not credible at the pricing levels they're at today.
It's such a huge tie, isn't it, to that credibility and price? Like you said kind of earlier, is that you tie it to, I think sometimes it devalues it. Sometimes when you're looking at it and, there is such thing as too cheap. There is such thing as like, but you kind of tell someone sometimes this probably isn't as good a solution because we're charging so little. So how do you even like talk to say a SaaS founder or something like that? How do you actually talk them around on that?
Oh yeah. Like I've got a rule of thumb. If you're a B2B SaaS founder and you don't have something that is at least $10,000 a year, you are not solving a big enough problem for your customers.
That's fair. That's a fair barometer because you've got that is that because a problem really can be measured by how much someone's willing to pay to solve it.
Yeah. And by my math, I do a 10 to 20x. $10,000 a year is going to be a 100 to 200K problem. Yeah, that's probably top 5 problems that they have. And if you're not in that top 5, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it. It's a good because I think people fall into the trap of going, well, everyone has this problem, but it's their 23rd biggest problem.
Yes.
And so the value of fixing it becomes in. So you got to go, well, all of a sudden you go, well, you've got to have 50,000 customers to be able to turn over a reasonable amount.
That's the other thing. I have a whole essay in my my Substack for starters that is at least pay for your lifestyle, where I walk through the math of different pricing levels against different kinds of customers to say, well, have you even covered your own costs?
Yeah.
And if you're charging, I don't know, $49 a month, you're gonna need a lot. And you're just starting out. How do you have access to that many just starting out?
Yeah. I think something really, because I've been in SaaS marketing for a few years now, and it's something that I think pricing is the topic that isn't really talked about very much within kind of within marketing especially, but even at that level of thing, people kind of, like you say, people tend to just kind of pick a number early on and go, I'll deal with it later, and then never really deal with it later. So
Yeah.
you've got a, you talk about your framework pricing from the start.
Yeah.
Can you just talk us through what that framework is and what it kind of, how it applies in like a practical terms?
Yeah. Uh, Pricing from the start starts with qualitative customer research. And we don't need a lot. Let's say somewhere between 10 and 20 customers we're going to talk to about the larger strategic problem that you're addressing.
Mm.
How do they think about it? What have they done to solve it? What have been frustrating and irritating about all of those solutions? Part of that is also a qualification. If they can't talk about that and like be emphatic about how frustrated they still are with all the things they've tried, they're probably not a customer to begin with.
Mm.
But now you've already identified who your competitive set is, identified what their biggest weaknesses are relative to this particular customer. And you now know what's important to them. You've got some idea of the size of their organization and some idea what they've shelled out already. So you already have some sense of value, and you know that value is too low because they're still frustrated, they're not happy, they're looking for another solution.
Yeah.
And so the goal of that effort is to understand what it is you're actually solving for your customers, and quantify that, what I call a window of value, that value that is below which you're not credible and above which you're just too expensive. What is that? What is, and then we can play around with packaging and tiers and segmentation within that window.
What about if you're starting from scratch, you're just,
Oh yeah.
an indie hacker or sole founder, you've got an idea, you've got an MVP, you get right, need to do pricing. Obviously, you don't have customers already.
Yeah.
How do you go about finding the people to then have those conversations with?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the challenge. I am continually surprised at the founders who are going after markets that they have no direct experience in that domain. They just sort of think, oh, well, I see a problem from the outside. I'm going to assert a solution to this community I have no involvement with. Like, why? No. And so the very first thing I recommend to them is you need to find 20 potential buyers. And then figure out, one, like if you can get the calls, and two, have the conversation about, hey, tell me about how you interpret this. So just like I was describing before, what I see instead is founders starting to build a solution, build a product, just investing in or over investing in the product side before they've got any sense of demand or what's valuable to customers, what specific thing they're going after. They just sort of assume, oh, well, if I can see the problem, it means that no one else has ever looked at it in the history of people.
But let's say you're a founder, you're drowning in development and you're desperate for users. Yeah. How do you convince them that they're not saving time by not doing this? How do you kind of say, oh, by the way, everything's doomed from the start if you don't consider this? How do you kind of convince them that?
Oh, that's admittedly, that's like saying, hey, if you could go back in time 15 years, how would you convince yourself to go down a different path? Yeah. So admittedly, to some degree, founders need to feel the pain of building a thing that the world doesn't want.
Yeah.
I do think that is some kind of rite of passage. I do think there is value in that. And then you're like, well, that was a bad idea. How do I fix that? So the thing is, you're going to need customers at some point. And I think too many founders who are infatuated with the vision of the product in their head overlook all the super small, low-cost ways that they can validate that there's any kind of market, any kind of customer demand. And it's not desk research for other solutions or similar solutions. It's using your network, using online communities to find the people, really hone in on those people that have that you think will be customers, and having those conversations with them. And even in there, you could get some sense of their willingness to pay. It's actually not hard. Now I have tripped over myself and shot myself in the foot multiple times in that question, but there are ways to frame the conversation that can start to get to value more, especially if you can talk about a comparison between two things, or even just throwing out some numbers that maybe you just napkin math in your head in the call and saying, oh, it sounds like this might be worth about X to you, or maybe Y. How does that feel? And not to lock them in, but more to be like, I'm just trying to get a sense of how important this is to you. Because it's not until then that you have enough information to build. Because at that point, you'll know who your customers are, what's important to them, some approximation of what their willingness to pay is. And then you can decide, oh, do I actually want to do that? Do I actually want to sell to these people? And sometimes, often, I don't know. I was I was part of a corporate innovation studio for a while. And most likely the answer is no, it's not worth our while to go after that opportunity after we do a handful of interviews. And that's okay. We have to be okay with that. Otherwise, that's an art project.
Yeah. I think that's the painful thing about it, is that's in business generally, you've as much as you might want something to work, as much as you might want there to be enough people there, sometimes having those conversations, you have to listen to it and go, okay, this isn't right. But on the same flip side of that, I've actually had it where it's pretty much the other way around, where I use this tool. Someone uses like AI writing tool to help with tone of voice and stuff like that. It was quite it was an interesting tool. And it was like, okay, you can join and use it for free. And then about 9 months later, I've been using it for a while, I got an email from him. He sent it out to everyone going, look, we're shutting it down. We can't afford to keep going stuff. And the thing that got to me was they never once said, hey, would you pay for it? Because I'd have paid. I think most people would have paid for, or at least a few people would have paid for that thing. And they just didn't know. They just went, oh, we can't afford to do it. Obviously, I think their priority was let's get investment for it. It didn't work, and so they shut it down. But they had a used base of people who would have. I was like, well, how much do I have to give you to not shut this down? Because I use this every day, and it's not like those other drawing tools that was about generating content. It was a genuinely useful tool that helped kind of highlight where improvements can be made to help consistency of tone of voice of that. It was great. And then it was like, nah, it's gone. I'm like, why? You didn't once say to me, give me money. You didn't once say, how much would you pay for this? And so they kind of had the opposite problem.
That's probably the third,
yeah. Not having the conversation, it can go both ways.
That's, I think, at a macro level right now, we are still fighting the final vestiges of the zero interest rate policy, at least here in the US. And I would characterize that as founders who have an idea whose first instinct to develop that idea is to go after investment and postpone the actual pricing and sales and development until well after the product's been developed, because they've gotten runway from investors on the promise that they're going to be massive. And that level of massiveness, I don't think in the short term, the next 5 years or so, is highly unlikely in the way that it was for the last 15 years. You could just keep throwing money at growth.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I started focusing on pricing, because I think it's one of the few levers that we have that works short term and long term on building a sustainable organization, independent of whatever kind of funding situation you have.
But the market in the SaaS world, it's almost as ridiculous as it's kind of an epidemic of underpricing, and there's a kind of a fear of, and obviously we've kind of like roughly kind of talked about kind of comparison that we kind of have of like, oh, well, these guys are charging £5 a month, so I better do £4 a month because otherwise I'm not going to get that sale and that kind of thing. How, is it imposter syndrome? Is it like an avoidance of is it avoidance of sales?
Yeah, like there's so many people who maybe come at this from a technology experience or come at this from a even domain experience. But what they don't have is the sales experience, or they've never been inside an organization that had to claw tooth and nail for customers. They've been in some more established organization where demand was continuous. And in the startup world, I was going to say, like, you could continue to throw money at Meta ads and Google ads. I don't got that kind of money anymore. And so instead of going to like doing the vulnerable thing to go out and have human to human conversations with potential customers, they do the comfortable thing and build and postpone and build and postpone and guess. And so it's a bit of a realization that ultimately you're helping people, and you can help people solve their problems in a non-technology way to start.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a whole, like, it's a definition of do things that are unscalable that I think is often overlooked, which is, and something I advocate for is, if you want to start a SaaS business, focus on that last S and start a service business first. And then automate to a product business.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it makes a lot of sense because you validate it, you find those issues early on, you can change on a dime. Because if you go through all the effort, and this is a problem that I'm sure you've seen as much as I have, that someone will go through years of development creating this product, they're so happy with it, but then they get there and go, oh, it doesn't actually solve the problem how people want it or expect it to be solved, and so all of a sudden they're having to change it all again. Whereas if you're doing it as a service to start with, you know what those mechanisms look like, you know what the actual problems are day to day that you're solving, and so, like you say, if you're automating the process that you have to do to solve it, then you know that the software then does the job. It's one of some of the best softwares in the world, ones that people just make for themselves to solve some other problem, and then go, oh, actually, now it's all for me, it works for everyone else. And then you just don't have that aspect of it. And like you said before about imposter syndrome and things like this, and about pricing, and I think there's also, from what I've seen, an element of, because this is what I see in copy a lot of this, not cowardice, but playing it safe. People go, people don't like to be polarizing, because if they say this is worth £200 a month, then some people are going to go, no, it's not, and that hurts to hear. You go, yes, it is, but the point is, it's supposed to be polarizing. You don't want everyone to, because you're not going to create software that everyone wants to pay $200 a month for, but you don't need to. You need 1 in 50 people who come to your landing page to go, yeah, cool. And then that's how it builds from there. You don't need it to be everyone, but people go, well, that's not, most people won't pay that much, so I'll bring it down. But then you just end up going, you say nothing at that point. You just devalue your own product.
And I think there continues to be an underestimation of the value of clear, distinctive niches.
Yes.
Which, in fact, is another way of saying a hesitation to be polarizing.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of this myself. When I decided, you know what, I think the opportunity is focusing on pricing, but not just pricing for SaaS, but not just SaaS, B2B SaaS, like I'm just gonna laser focus on pricing the B2B SaaS, there was a part of me that was like, oh my God, that's so constrictive. Like, how will there ever be enough customers for that? How can I? And I was
What if a B2C SaaS person comes to my website and goes, well, they're not for me then?
yeah, right. And I was like, okay, so how I think of it and how the way I describe it is, you think of it as a target with the bullseye in the middle. If you are uncomfortable, claiming that niche and just laser focusing on that niche, especially early on, because you don't want to leave anybody out, say, this is who we think our best customer is. This is who we're going to be delighted to serve constantly. But we're also human enough to know that we might not be totally right. And so we have these rings on the outside of that bullseye that allow us to consider, do we accept the one that's 2 rings away? Do we accept the one that's 1 ring away? Different characteristics. We're not going to, maybe we say no to totally off the target. We probably should. But once it's on the target, we should at least consider it, especially early on.
Yeah, and I feel like people aren't as put off as you assume in the moment. If you say, oh, this SaaS is for project management for construction workers, then that doesn't mean that a landscape gardener is not going to come in and go, well, that means it'll probably apply to me as well. Yeah. So I'll give it a look. Like people are intelligent. People don't actually need, they don't just see a different word and go, well, that's not me, I'll just go away. People are clever enough to go, if it solves their problem, I have the similar problems, it'll probably be good for me. And there's going to be B2B problems that this needs solving for my B2C, or there's going to be, it might not be a SaaS, but at the same time, I still need help with pricing. If they know SaaS pricing, they'll probably be able to help with package pricing, for example. And so I think we need to kind of trust that people aren't idiots and they can come to the website, read it, and go, sure, I might not be like, some people go, that's really not me, and they go away, and that's good. You don't want them there. And the same way that you need people to do it in the same, and it's the same with pricing. It's the same logic that you kind of go, it's fine, it's perfectly fine. Some people will go, that's out of my budget, but actually, I'll pay a bit more if it's to try it out, or I'll try it out first, do a free trial or whatever, and see from there. People aren't as stupid as people sometimes assume.
No, and I think the distinction I would make into that is, I want the people who look at the website and say, I think this might fit for me, even though it's not who the speaking towards, because that to me is a signal of high urgency and frustration. I will try anything at this point, even if it's not directly targeted at me, because I need some help.
Yeah.
I was on a project 7 years ago or so now. We were so you can think of like factory workers, and we were looking for an easy sort of broadcast communication service for hourly factory workers. And the team I was working with was so desperate. We were looking at communication systems designed for construction workers, designed for teachers, designed for like everything across, like kudos to all of those products for like niching themselves. We looked at all of them over the course of a day. Which one of these do we think will fit best for our constituents? And in the end, we picked the construction worker one.
Yeah, because in there it comes down to then features and price.
Yep. We were not in the construction domain, but it had all of the features and price that we needed to help our people out.
Yeah, I think people. Yeah, it makes a big difference. Actually, when I first started as a SaaS copywriter, when myself as that, one of my first customers was a bamboo cutlery company. I don't know really how that happened, but they went, this isn't software, but we like your vibe, and then they hired me. I think people kind of look beyond that, and sometimes they look at it and go, because they're niching and solving specific problems, there's an implication that, and again, if it's charging more as well, the pricing's higher, there's an implication that you've done more to solve the problem, and so it is worth more. And actually, by having that niche, even if it's not quite the niche you're after, it can sometimes be enough to tell you this is going to be a better solution than that generic solution over here that's $15 a month. This one here that's $200 a month and targeted at this industry. They've really looked at the problem. They've talked to people. They've solved the problem. They're experts in that industry. And that tells
and I think that's
story.
always the for forever now, for 20 some years now, if I could, as long as Basecamp has been around, I have always had this tension with basically anything like that. And the tension is Basecamp or whatever sees a lot of projects either successfully or unsuccessfully, or just have some sense of the shape of those things, how to make things work well, presumably, like all of that stuff, right? Presumably they are experts in project management. And so they're going to lay out the interface, lay out the features, the functionalities, blah, 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 based on their, expertise in seeing hundreds of millions of projects.
Yeah.
And then there's the organization that says, we need project management, and we have a way of doing projects in our organization that is the way that we do it. Is it a good way? Is it better than the Basecamp way? I don't know, but it's going to be some tension if they ever go out and purchase one of those kinds of SaaS products for it, because now their people are going to need to learn new terms, figure out new processes, blah, 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 blah. But ostensibly, a more expert system, right? Maybe?
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's the thing. The assumption potentially is that, and so do you pay a premium to get that expertise and to get that thing, and on the kind of trust that they do know what they're talking about?
Yeah.
Or the alternative cost of that is going to something like ClickUp or Jira or something, where you're fully in control, but then those things are only as good as the configuration, right? And so the cost goes the other way there. And is it go, great, we'll now do it now, but then Gary from IT's fucked everything. He's set everything up wrong, and now we're no better off than if we just use a Trello in the first place. So it's contrast.
And then the best is, we need some kind of ClickUp expert to come in here and fix this. And they come in and say, what have you done?
Yeah. Start from scratch. Have you heard of Basecamp?
Maybe you shouldn't be making so many decisions.
Yeah, maybe your process wasn't good enough in the first place. Just trust someone else.
So, I want to talk about psychological pricing, because it's something that interests. I think it affects, obviously, me and John. We kind of do a lot of our kind of creative stuff, and we often have a bit of a panic of what is our actual inherent value and how we perceived sometimes, because you can say, look, I'll do this beautiful drawing for £1,000, and then they've gone, that's a bit too much, or you drop it down to 100, and then suddenly they're like, it's good, but I've just hired this other guy because he's better, and you're like, but we're the same quality, it's just the pricing's different. I'd love to hear your kind of like view on the kind of this idea of actually pricing yourself for your value and how it can be changed based on that pricing itself.
Oh my goodness, this is This is my second go round on my own practice, and my promise to myself is I'll do better this time. The first time around, I fell into that a lot, because and the bias that I would fall into was pricing my services against my own sense of what a dollar was, not what that meant to my client.
To a big company.
Right. And to the big company, I should just keep adding zeros until they blink, is the right strategy there. But I ran into this on the project that I referenced earlier. I ran into it on that one as I was flushing things out, like, again, taking a look at how does their current pricing model scale? What do I think a recommended number would be in there against the value I'm seeing across all of these reports? And I entered the numbers in, and what came back was a massive number compared to what I've been working with.
Okay.
And I was like, well, I wouldn't pay that. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
I'm not. This is not for me. Why am I applying my own preferences to this? This is for an organization that is crazy big and has a massive need. It's not some guy in his basement. Why am I doing this to myself? Yeah. So I had to check myself, and and step back and say, all right, independent of my feelings about this, does this number make sense relative to all the other numbers, relative to the structure I'm putting together? Yes, it does. Great. We're golden. Let's keep going.
Oh, cool. So on the other kind of like, obviously this is from your kind of as an individual, but on the other kind of front of it, in the B2B SaaS world, there's often a kind of like this idea like price anchoring of like, we're going to do this thing and then we're going to drop it on a discount next day. Isn't this amazing? I'd love to know the kind of like, has you ever seen an example yourself of where that nudge crosses an ethical line or it's backfired spectacularly? I'd love to hear about that if that's possible.
I don't know if
Well, you have gone in with the hard-hitting questions, Alex. Gone for the
I know. I feel really guilty.
I thought I was joking earlier when I said that this might be the time, but here we go. He's going.
It's getting spicier as it goes.
I have not seen an instance where I think anybody is priced too high. I will say where it becomes that kind of a problem. What I have seen is you are talking to the wrong customer, or you have not done your homework to have an approximation of what that value window is for this customer that you're talking to.
Yeah.
And then sometimes, especially if you got an outbound sales team, the absolute easiest thing to do is just say, have them get the sale at whatever price.
Yeah.
That gives us some sense of value. It's not great, but some sense of actual value is better than no sale at a higher price in some instances. It's got its own challenges because I'll tell you, when I first started getting into pricing, talked to some mentors, and they said, yeah, great, huge problem, huge need, keep going. And they sent me some old articles, like late 90s articles from like Harvard Business Review on the power of pricing and the gotchas to look for as soon as you walk in the door. And they spent a lot of time talking about how the hardest thing sometimes to get the handle on is how much discounts did a given customer get. Because there's like, hey, we'd really like you to pay this, but because of A, B, and C, we'll knock 10% off of that, right? That's sort of expected. What they brought up multiple times in these articles was there's also the sales guy saying, I could also cut off 15% on that and not tell anyone. So then you're like, well, what is it worth and what are they paying? Again, and they just said, and here's how to actually get to that price. So I read through these articles, I send a thank you to these mentors, and I said, great reads, great to get the history, great to get these perspectives. I don't think this is the problem in SaaS. I think the problem in SaaS is they're just not charging enough. Proven wrong almost immediately. If you have an outbound sales team, you have this problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're giving discounts that you were surprised by, that they have been able to like slide through just to get the sale. Yeah. And you don't know. You don't know.
So there's kind of like a paradox though with this kind of pricing, especially for customers, where customers are often demanding huge transparency. They want to know that they go to your landing page and they're like, oh, it's this much value and that's it. But then at the same time, we've got this strange situation where now personalized pricing is starting to come more and more prominent in the kind of industry, where there's like an enterprise model or an enterprise subscription that then that's somehow then suddenly hidden, and then it changes depending on how many users you've got or exactly what features you have, and then you've got to go on the sales call anyway. You have to deal with it. So, like, just how often should like you as if you're in the B2B SaaS industry, how often should you be tweaking, and kind of like what are they kind of KPIs beyond like conversion rates to kind of monitor in that sense of things?
You've got to have a purpose. And I would go so far as saying you've got to have a purpose per tier, a purpose per customer segment.
Yeah.
Pick one, right? And say, for this segment, for this tier, we want this kind of change. We want this kind of segment to get the higher tier, or we want this tier to grow in a way that it hasn't, or what have you. And so not the entire product, but little tweaks here and there for strategic purposes around different segments or tiers. I was working on a project, premium ERP service for small agencies, and they called me and said, we're getting pushback on price. I'm like, yeah, I could have told you that, but was actually able to quantify it and illustrate it such that I could say, hey, of the value growth that you are promising to provide your customers by use of your software, you are charging exactly 10% of what that's worth to them.
Gosh.
Yeah, you're getting pushback. That's too high. And there's like a consistent line across all your segmentation. And so what we worked on was, how do we unbundle to get a more approachable price tag at the lower end of their segments, on the promise that that segment will stick with them and grow themselves to become a higher segment. But we needed a lower entry point for some of those, just to not get the same kind of the constant pushback. And so I talked to them a month or so ago. Hey, how's it going? And they said, well, we're only getting about 65% pushback now. Okay, good job. Progress.
Yeah, progress works.
Oh man.
Right. Well,
and so in terms of how frequently, constantly monitoring and quarterly experimentation.
What does that experimentation look like? I was about to say we're out of time, but at the same time now intrigued to. That's it. But what does that look like in regards to that experimentation, kind of actual day to day?
Yeah, if we've got something we're actually listing dollar signs on on websites, you play with the packaging, play with the limits on the packaging, play with the actual number. But you don't, like, if you're hesitant to play with the actual number, just play with the packaging. And if you've got the call the salesperson, there's some qualifier that will happen before the salesperson talks to you, and they're going to get a sense of what this organization is, where do I think they fall against the tiers, and they're going to be testing in that conversation anyway. And so if the salesperson has some idea of, from the C-suite, here is the pricing levels for these tiers that we're trying to test with, they're going to do it and you're not even going to know, and that's going to be fine.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Garrick, for coming on and talking about pricing. It's one of those topics where I think we could talk to you all day about it. I think it's a much bigger problem than people give it credit for. And so people should follow you to find out more about how they can do it. Speaking of which, how can people find and follow you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Garrick van Buren. You can find me at forstarters.substack.com, where I rant about these kinds of things. And you can find me at pricingfromthestart.com.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for coming on and chatting to us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, John. Thank you, Alex. Talk soon.
Thank you.